Adobe and pull everything up that way?
That was what I was doing.
Okay, let me see. Okay, so let's see, share content. There we go. Share. See if I've got that much. Okay, that means I can upload.
Yep. And are you able to put that in presentation mode or full screen mode or something?
Yeah, isn't that free?
There we go. That looks better. Yep.
Okay, so let me make sure I have all the rest of them loaded. I mean, that's the fastest way to make sure we go quickly. Agenda. Is it popping now into that? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
They'll have to just live with that while I get share slides. And I think I'm flow specs first. And I can't find it. There, flow spec. That way I can just go between these things. We'll be fast as we can. Okay, now I don't have, John, do you have the next one? Is it progress report is next? What's after progress report? Could you just read it to me?
Yeah, let me just make my screen a little bit bigger here. It's IDR BGP request CP SRTE policy.
Okay, and the next one after that?
IDR CTR reliability.
Availability
Uh,
or reliability?
Reliability is it's showing up on here, but the deck is named BGP for network high availability. In fact, when
okay, let me get in on the other screen.
Availability is correct.
Okay. I'm gonna I'm just getting the other one up and going. Ah, come on. Okay, let me pop it over to a few minutes. Okay, after high availability.
Is it you that's on the treadmill, or are we getting that audio from somewhere else?
We're getting it from something else. I assure you, you might hear heavy breathing, but that's only because I'm focused on.
I'm gonna mute our call-in user if I can figure out how to do that. It's probably good for me now. Anyway.
I'll mute the call in. Hold on. Do we have one for the both of us, or hold on? I got to get back down out of it into participants in order.
They must have muted themselves. I actually don't see how to mute another person. Which I would have thought I should have that ability, but I don't see it.
Can you hear me now? Okay, now I'm muting myself.
Yeah, and now I don't hear you. Oh, I see. I see why I can't mute people is that you are the host, I'm not the host.
Okay, so I have to play mute the people. Okay.
Yes, unless I do this reclaim host role thing. Shall I try that and we'll see if it
That's okay. Since I'm doing the presentation, I think I've got everything up and going. I sent a note to Linda to suggest we delay hers till next meeting.
Okay. Do you hear
Since we
anything
don't
back from her yet?
No, but she was
Okay.
waiting for me on something else, so
Okay.
on this draft, so I think we'll be okay. It should allow us, okay. My Jabber client, my Jabber client is underneath this, so let me see if I can get my Jabber up here. Okay, I've got my Jabber in the corner. Can you see the Jabber or not?
I see a message from you that says, "Hi, John and Jeff." Actually, I don't see Jeff on right now. I just see you and me.
Okay, it was just you. Okay.
It may be that we don't get a lot of people in Jabber, which is fine too. But
Okay.
I'll keep it up on my screen and monitor it.
Should I take it down? I'll take it down from this screen then, because that's what I guess I have is everything.
If it's if your screen is too cluttered, I will keep an eye on it. No problem.
No. What is coming up on the screen for?
Oh, yeah. What I see on the screen is I see the note well slide, but I see a gray box partly covering the upper left-hand corner, which is maybe your Jabber window.
Yeah, now is it just over where the gray area is now?
Yes.
Okay, do you see the participants call list?
I mean, what you're projecting is I see note well, I see some tabs along the top. I see the blue share button in the upper right, and I see some icons down the right, and I see the gray box on the left. That's it.
Okay, so I've got everything to where I think we're good to go. All I got to do is get I got to get into the, second, I got to get into the, minutes taking stuff. Etherpad.
All right. Yes, I should do that too.
And I've got to get into the blue Etherpad.
I need like 6 computers to keep track of all this stuff.
Well, and you wonder why we have a spare computer at the, okay, so I got to sign in to the blues.
I saw that you sent out a request for volunteers. Did anybody say that they would take notes?
I don't know that I sent out a request
Okay.
for volunteers. I sent out a working group, but that's the first thing we should do is call for, hi, please type.
Right. So that's since other people are on and they're presumably listening to us right now. If any of you would be willing to hop on the Etherpad and help us take notes, that'd be great. We also have a blue sheet up. They're both linked from the agenda. So feel free to start.
I just signed you in, John.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
We've got about 2 minutes and we're set to go. So I guess I should put up the interim meeting. Here's the topics. And we're going to give it about, AC and everybody, we're going to give it about 5 minutes. Should we give it a couple minutes or go straight ahead, John?
Well, let's give it a few minutes. I feel like we're not, so crowded that we have to do everything like right up to the minute. And
Okay.
let's start at say 5 past the hour. And
Okay.
why don't you put up the slide that has the Etherpad and the blue sheet?
Okay, let's see if I've
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah,
Here's Etherpad and the blue sheet, folks.
I see somebody started a virtual blue sheet tacked onto the bottom of the minutes Etherpad too, which whatever, we can cut and paste between them. That's fine.
I've been known to cut and paste. I've just done that.
Just a reminder to participants, mute yourselves when you're not speaking.
Can I ask you guys just to drop those links into the WebEx chat, please, for people to easily click on?
That's a good idea. I can do that.
Okay.
Good morning.
Hello.
John, I've got to do the recording thing. Just a minute. Did you hit the recording or is it paused for me?
I set it when I
It's on. It looks like it says it's.
yeah, when I set the meeting up, I set it to record by default. So all of our chat at the beginning has been recorded as well.
Okay, super. Okay. I'm going on mute until we get 2 to 3 minutes forward. Folks, please sign in on the blue sheets. The blue sheets is virtual this time. And
I just pasted the URLs into the WebEx chat as per, I think it was Darren's suggestion.
folks, if you're a call-in user, would you please type your name into the call-in user ID? That way we'll be able to take notes a little easier. Thank you.
Hi, Steve. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, this is Jedong. I'm one of the calling users because sometimes the audio from the computer is not that good.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so Jay was calling user 3. And he just disappeared. And you got a name. Sorry.
Do you want me to do the chair slide and then go into?
Yeah, let's go ahead and project those. I guess we should get going.
Okay. Give me a second while something seems to be amiss. There we go. No. Okay, folks, it's about 4 minutes after. Please, everyone who's online, we're recording this, but it'd be really handy if you'd please type your name into the blue sheets. That's part of the request. We are under the note well. We did project that earlier, but I will re-show it. This proceeding is part of IETF. Read the note well. We suspect you've done it. If you have any questions, read the note well on the interim webpage. So our 2020 IDR, we're going to have two slots pre-assigned. This one in April 8th. If we need another one, we'll go ahead and ask for one immediately after everyone else, probably next to our friends in LSR. Last I checked, that was close to the end of the month. Is that right, AC? Your last LSR session? Okay, he must be on mute. Okay, let's go right into the next thing, which is the flow spec discussion. Our first two presentations, the flow spec and the auto configuration, are more discussions. So please, folks, I'm going to start with the discussion, but we need your feedback. The auto design configuration design team G will give a summarization, and the rest of the auto configuration design team will probably add comments. It's a discussion moment on where they are. Then we'll go into 60 minutes of draft presentations. Hopefully that'll keep us awake for the folks on the West Coast. Okay. So
hey, Sue.
Yep.
Before let's just talk through the logistics for people who joined later and didn't view those yet or whatever. So I'm not sure if anybody's hopped in the Etherpad yet to help us take notes. This is being recorded, of course, so and there's no scope for side chatter that can't be picked up on the recording, so that's maybe slightly kinder to the chairs. But even kinder to the chairs than that would be if you help us produce the notes in real time. That would be great. Thank you. If you haven't signed the blue sheets yet, please do. I will repaste those URLs into the WebEx chat in just a second. So we're hoping to use for mic line management the same protocol that was used during the official IETF 107 sessions, which is please put a +Q into the chat and wait to be recognized. And just like you would at the regular mic line, please state your name. And yeah, that's about it. We have Jabber if you need to do other side chat. And I had one other slide, Sue, with just like a couple of administrivia things.
Yep, let me get to it.
There we go. Slide is slightly old, but that's okay. So the two administrivia things that I wanted to mention, one of which is on the slide that's being projected or was going to be projected, is that the authors on the BGP open policy draft have requested working group last call. So we will start that shortly. The other thing was there was a request a few days back, or maybe about a week back, from I think it was TCPM, to say please put your eyes on the their working group last call. That request is on our mailing list, but I just wanted to highlight it. Okay, that's it from me.
John, let me know if I'm missing something in the chat line.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, folks.
I'm monitoring the Jabber room and stuff, and I'll break in if I need to.
Okay, thanks. Okay, this is a discussion about BGP flow spec. I went back and looked at the first time I suggested a V2 at an interim, and that was June 27, 2016. So life has gone on. We've gotten here through about 4 years. We decided to do a quick 5575 bis. That didn't turn out so quick. And we have a really good up and coming. So it's a kickoff for an informed call for presentations on April 8th for the next IDR session. I'm going to sort of walk through what we've done, where we're going, and then we need some discussions, so we set requirements. And then my last question of this presentation is, do we need other discussions? Do we need to have, before we get there, an IDR large community discussion, in case we have to talk about wide communities, large communities? Both of them have been on the list. So, flow spec review. You should remember that we had the NLRI, we had V6 coming in, no user-based filters, and we thought about security. Okay, and could it be lessened within a single draft? That went back all the way to 2016. Here's our standard flow spec policy. It's a rule list, followed by the rule, followed by match filters, followed by modify and forward. That should have been mom and apple pie. The RFC 5575 bis fixes fixed the NLRI, replacing the encoding, the opaque key with an encoding, defined new comparison bits and matches, had traffic filtering extensions, and added traffic rate. The security section was updated, but that didn't change anything except the words and warnings. And we have a draft IDR flow spec V6, which we've need for the ISG to consider 5575 bis, or they strongly recommended they'd like to see it, but we've had no working group last call comments or work. John and I will need to say it's going forward, but the draft is under my authorship, under Christoph first authorship, and Robert and I. So please make some sort of comments on the list. We really do need to push this forward and through. So
Whoever
please,
is typing with their microphone on, please stop it.
Robert
Better.
or call-in user, hi. Feel free to add any comments as I go through some of this. Call-in user 4. If you're call-in user 4, please make sure your mic's off. Okay. So what do we have as well? Besides begging and pleading that I need some comments on the V6 spec, here's the mature specifications, and here's part of what I need to hear from the operators. Notice back in 2016, the draft IDR BGP flow spec OID was there because it allowed ASs to, such as AT's one usage, to use centralized flow spec filtering without making the flow spec filtering go through through the box. We had a list discussion about problems putting that in 5575 bis. We need to have a little bit discussion because this is one of the things where people say they already have deployed it. Why can't I have this pushed on to 5575 bis? And the list seems to say too many broken things. So I'd like to pick that one up. The second one is there are several additions to the flow spec, either adding tunnel filters for flow spec NVO3, adding L2 VPN filters, or extending the RT consideration for a group identifier for interfaces or having the path redirect. Most of these have either gone through some implementation or implementation and deployment. So we've got to sort of say, what are we going to do with this? Are we going to go on to FlowSpec NG? Next generation was the next politest thing I could say. Are we going to pick some of these and say, oh no, to our AD, these must go in? The less adopted but less mature are FlowSpec match for MPLS and label. That seemed to be hot, and then maybe with MPLS SR it became less. There's an adoption request for Draftly IDR FlowSpec and a couple more in the churning situations, Draft Wang FlowSpec Dip Origin AS Filter and Draftlu IDR FlowSpec iFit. All of these have been put on hold while we try to force the 5575 BIS into IETF last call. It's there. One other thing, there is a draft already using the wide community atoms. That was what I had originally proposed, and I'm going to come back to my questions, to use some sort of sub-TLVs ordering, because that's what's really, there's no ordering or sequencing of the filters. It's all of them are turned on and that's what you put in. If you wanted to have some ordering, just say this is the priority first, then this is the second, or some sort of weighting. You need some sort of TLV with some sort of length, with something there to make sure we know what's happening. And one way to put it was to put a new action atom for wide communities and put some things in. Notice there are some people using wide communities. Another option is putting a atom directly in wide communities, using that as the only one, putting a source number AS and a list of atoms. Those are all things that we've talked about in the past. I've now done my review, and here's our question. And at this point, we're going to take notes as best I can. Maybe, G, you could help me with this one, and I'll do the design spec on the next one. If you can type. If not, folks, we'll try to pick it up. What do operators need for FlowSpec? Thank you, G. What do operators need now for flow specification? At which point I need to hear from folks who are deploying or working with folks who are deploying. What do you have to have now?
Sue, do you want to read your whole slide, or do you want to take questions now?
I want to take I'm assuming people can read, but I'd like to go through the questions one at a time.
Okay, so you have somebody in the mic line. Jeff is in the mic line.
Yes, Jeff, go ahead.
Mic check.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good.
So unfortunately, you're barreling through a whole bunch of interrelated topics, so that's making it difficult to respond to them individually. What you're sort of hitting at the beginning of your slide deck really is where we're at, where we have some number of things that mature. So like 5575 BIS is about the pop. That's great. FlowSpec V6 basically is do 5575 in V6. So that should be easy. OID is well deployed. That should be easy, etc. So a lot of these things are just simply cleaning up stuff that has some level of implementation. That's great.
So
the related point, unfortunately, is once we get past anything that involves changing the NLRI, the actions are one thing, but changing the NLRI, one of the things that is became very apparent as we were doing the 5575 this stuff is that implementations are intolerant of the original specification of so-called opaque stuff, mostly because the TLV format did not actually support type length in each of the cases, which made it impossible for us to parse things that we didn't understand. If you would move to your slide covering the FlowSpec V2 stuff, or G, It's not so much that people are looking for the sub TLVs to actually have precedence order. The issue that people have, since this is the slide, the issue is that since FlowSpec represents firewall rules, and firewall rules are groupings of, apply this set of thing in this order, it's less that an individual sub TLV which matches a component type has a precedence. It's the fact that a rule that is represented by a set of matches as a precedence. So basically the order would bubble out one level.
Jeff, you're right. I probably did mix everything, and my questions were meant to split it down into what should be deployed first. So can we pick up the ordering if you think it can, into what specifications can be adopted with the current 5575 BIS, which you mentioned first? Could we
Right,
pick
and
up that thread?
right, and just to finish off my comments, this is going to be the broad set of comments I would give through the set of presentations.
Okay.
Is we have some things that probably can be done, quite easily just simply by doing a FlowSpec v2 that allows for strict, TLV definitions of the NLRI. That's I think the core basis of what we need to proceed for 5575 BIS. If we allow for rule ordering, I think there's going to be some interesting debate on there, and that's going to be a tricky thing. And I think the final item that will be somewhat tricky is the incremental deployment considerations. One of the things that sort of became apparent across the full set of feature recommendations that we have is once we start getting into things that start crossing boundaries. So for example, there was a proposal that allowed for the FIB to take programming from FlowSpec at the same time as the firewall rules take programming. You start crossing how rule ordering can actually happen. And in some of those cases, the fix for it may be keep the same encoding, but potentially different AFI-SAFI. So I think that's the three broad set of things. The rest of it is just mostly, I think, squishing things down in the same app. And then the last bits of fallout, as you're having on your slides, is for our various actions, how do we want to handle encoding of those? And there are several different proposals. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question because it was on the list. Somewhat I thought from you is let's go back to our friend OID. Can OID, what I heard you say is that OID could be done with a better definition of the NLRI. Or did I hear you say it could be done with the current RFC 5575 BIS? Which
So
one of those ones?
the 55 OID could be shipped. OID specifically impacts the validation rules of how FlowSpec gets deployed. And I know that Christoph and company had some debate as to whether we should simply fold in the OID specification into 5575 BIS. And I believe the consensus at the time was to not do that. The motivation I believe Christoph cited was that this is a BIS document and therefore we're cleaning up things that are erroneous out of it rather than trying to pull in different proposals. That said, every flow spec that I'm familiar with does the OID things because it's the necessary work to originate this stuff from a route reflector.
So
That document's an interesting place of, you could publish it as a RFC that basically is an immediate and very common modification to 5575, or the working group could decide to fold it back into 5575 BIS.
since 5575 is in last working ITF last call, I think that one's, well, that'll be an interesting discussion.
And I think that was where it was left in. We're just going to proceed basically with immediate modification to the base.
Okay. Any other comments on OID? Contrary to Jeff, thoughts on the same thing, concerns?
Hi, Sue. This is Jim Utaro. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So I was one of the folks that felt that OID, widely deployed, widely used, is one of the biggest use cases for FlowSpec, and it should be folded into the general document itself. Instead of having two parallel documents that, sort of juxtaposed against each other. I still feel that way.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm going to relay a comment that Robert made on Jabber, and he said, just reiterate Jeff's comment, changing NLRI format without new capabilities or new SAFI just does not go that well with any AFI SAFI, not just FlowSpec. Meaning this isn't a problem specific to FlowSpec. It's a broader problem. So at least that's how I read it. I'm editorializing now.
Anyone else? So what I'm hearing is most people say we should have gone ahead and put OID in with the 5575 BIS.
Just to oh, go ahead.
Apologies, I should use the push cue. It's worth pointing out that we're already in the process of discussing V2, so publish as is, get into V2.
Okay, is the next one.
Yeah,
okay.
This is John. I was with my co-chair hat on. Just to remind everybody, that was kind of the plan from the get-go. Was unfortunately sort of best laid plans of mice and men, but the idea was to get the BIS out, quote, fast unquote, so that we could then turn around and do any protocol changes in V2, which was itself not intended to be massive new protocol. It was intended to be, let's now take the any non-backward compatible changes we need to make and roll them in.
Okay. Folks, the other things that have FlowSpec NVO3, which has been switched to do tunnel filters, probably the better way to do that. L2 VPN, FlowSpec interface, path redirect. Does that all go sort of into the let's have the second category, Jeff, listed, which is better TLV definition?
Path redirect is in the class of redirect actions rather than matching NLRI. So it's not impacted by the need for a FlowSpec. So path redirect is effectively the same thing as like redirect IP or redirect if that's part of the core spec. So it doesn't require NLRI changes.
I'll make sure that other people feel the same way, Jeff. I'm only these this is coming up because I had some notes. I want to make sure I've at least raised it.
And Jeff, I think that you should make sure that the minutes properly reflect what your point is, when we get around to polishing up the minutes.
Yes. Okay. Some people said that the action in IDR FlowSpec path redirect needed some sense of order. Is that true? Not true. Jeff doesn't believe it's true. I'm asking for feedback. I know it's early in the morning, folks. I thought talking would help.
Path Redirect does have within the redirections itself in the communities a form of ordering.
Mm-hmm.
There was discussion on the fact that doing those sorts of things with communities is dangerous, considering that they could just be added or dropped by things in the middle of the network. They're not part of NLRI, but that's a distinct point from FlowSpec itself needing the NLRI needing a ordering.
I agree. It is the ordering. Yes, they are two different things, and I should have been more careful in my question, Jeff. Thank you for the clarification. So, folks, at this point, we're going to go with the next round of flow specs, NVO3, L2 VPN, R2 interface with going to the better LRI. The interface looks to redefine the route target and the group identifier. Does that need anything different than the NLRI?
So jumping the mic again, as one of the authors of that spec, we did actually discuss whether or not that belonged in the NLRI, and one of the motivations for an extended community ended up being the fact that it was so difficult to change the NLRI and have it be transitively deployed. But that said, we actually talked ourselves into a different story over the course of the document. We're actually past due saying the update for the document. What we figured out over the course of the development work is that unlike most match criteria that we have in FlowSpec, despite the fact that this is effectively a match criteria, this is a match criteria that may actually need to change or even be deleted when you cross various boundaries. So as an example, interface scoping means something in a given domain. This is one of the usual BGP problems of you don't really have good namespacing on some of our elements. So if ASFoo it has interface ID scoped as 100 meaning customers, once you leave AS100, it stops meaning that. So that's a case where when it crosses an ASBR, it may actually make sense to delete that. However, if it was encoded in NLRI, we have sort of long-standing wisdom that changing NLRI on a hop-by-hop basis can be dangerous because you could end up with sort of like packet copy machines where things are just sort of constantly changing back and forth in a metastable fashion. So we decided that despite the fact that it's a match criteria, since it is intended to be modified rather than re-originated, it should stay.
Okay, and again, you have part of the questions. If communities can be deleted, does that give you a problem within a confederation?
Within a single management domain, which could be confederations, a single AS, a span of ASs under a single entity, it should be fine.
The
This
operative word being should be.
should be, and it's in exactly the same space of should be as a L3 VPN operator needing to be careful about not overloading too many route targets into a L3 VPN NLRI.
Okay, so we have the NLRI changes for NVO3, L2 VPN. We have community changes within a domain for a FlowSpec interface, and we have ordering questions on FlowSpec path redirect, all of which have seen deployment. It sounds it still sounds like we should do the NLRI fix to put in the FlowSpec interface. Is that true? Because then there's the clear ordering, or not, Jeff?
We should not. Basically, to go back to one of Robert's comments about the dangers of changing NLRI, usually needing a new AFI-SAFI, we don't want an element that's intended to be rewritten at going inside an NLRI.
I'm sorry, different question. I was unclear. do we need to go to the revision 2 of flow spec with the better NLRI to deploy draft IDR flow spec interface?
No, we're seeing good deployment of that right now, and I'm aware of at least one implementation, which is not having any issues, and my employer is in the process of coding it up as well.
Okay. Jim, Yataro, any comments on that? Anyone else who's deployed flow spec interface?
No comment. So that's Jimmy Tar, AT&T. No comment.
Okay. Any other operator that wants to provide me comments? Okay, we'll take private comments. That would be fine. The chairs are really trying to figure out where we draw the line. What I've heard right now is flow spec interface and flow spec OID, with flow spec OID coming as fast as humanly possible. I believe the OID, Jim, has been reviewed by Christoph. It's been reviewed by me. We'll work on that. Then the interface, the next two, the NLRI, the flow spec NVO3 and L2 VPN for the next revision. And I still have not heard any questions to resolve the flow spec ordering issues. So I would like to have a conversation with the flow spec redirect authors and make sure we've gotten through that. Just a minute, I've got to close something. I guess I can't. Okay. The rest of these would absolutely need to be deployed inside of a flow spec NLRI. Better idea. Is there any comments on authors from that where they would have differing of that? I think I must, that's my default as trying to sort through these. Okay, last but not least, do we have any dependencies? Do we need to pick up the large communities discussion before we pick up the NLRI discussion or more extended work?
Jeff is in the mic line again. I think Jeff can go ahead.
Thank you, John. So I want to say one thing general about large communities, and this applies to a lot of things that are going around IETF right now. For reasons some people didn't agree with at the time, the original authors for large communities decided to not leave any distinguished number space for them.
Mm-hmm.
The main problem that we have for large communities is exactly that problem. And it doesn't matter what we're going to use it for. We're at a point where people are going to want to start carving out sort of like the equivalent of 1997 well-known communities. We just need to pick a number and assign it and live with the fact that the feature is young enough that hopefully some operator somewhere isn't using that magic number.
Okay. I have what I have. We're going to assume deprecated AS sets and confed sets, as I haven't seen anything other than people telling me steps in the refinement. Okay, I've gone my time on this, maybe a little long, Jeff. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? So I will be contacting all the authors on this, minus the OID, for a quick status update. The OID, I think we're pretty good. Jim, as far as I know, it's a pretty well done deal. Do you want to, you and any of the co-authors that you know of, want to provide any feedback on deployment at the next IDR meeting? because I will start another working group last call.
Sue, this is Jimmy Tower, AT&T. I will check with my internal folks to see what they would like to share and would not like to share. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'd appreciate that. I would suggest that we're going rapidly into a working group last call for that. Please, again, please respond to the V6. John and I will have to push that one forward to the ISG. We'd rather have your feedback.
And I would like to relay a couple of comments that were in the WebEx chat, just to make them part of the main conversation here. So Snyder says, question, what does FlowSpec have to do with large communities? Or am I confused about the topic at hand? Jeff Haas replies, Job, people want to encode actions in them. Job Snyder's very cogently says, ugh. Randy Bush says, Job, well said.
Okay.
be clear,
The chair can't say oof, ugh. So thank you very much, Job and Andy. Okay.
Hey, Sue?
Yeah.
Stacy. Hey, I see the offer, some of the offers are on the phone, but there is a non-working group draft for known communities, for well-known in regards to Jeff's final comment. There's a short draft space for large community, well-known communities.
Thank you. I'll take a look at that and query the authors. Are you one
We
of the
have-
authors?
It's Jacob. Yeah, I'm an author of well-known large communities, and I've got time to present that next week.
Yep, that's what I had hoped. Okay, thank you.
So one more person in the line is Randy. Please go ahead.
I'll put in the Etherpad a reference to our paper, which is why Job said, oh, and I seconded him, which is essentially major encoding actions in a community is a major attack vector.
Thank you, Randy. Yes, we'll come back to you on the 8th along with flow specs. Okay, I think I've had enough fun for today. G, it's your turn. I'm now turning this over to G and taking up the trading places with him on the Etherpad. John is gonna watch the mic list. G, go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. And I'll move the slides. Just tell me next.
Okay. Thank you. So this is a progress report from the DGP AutoConf design team. I'm presenting here on behalf of all the design team members. Next slide, please. Okay, so basically, this is quoted from John's email to the working group. The purpose of the design team is to, firstly, to identify the requirements and also to do some solution-based review, and which can be used to guide our further discussion in the working group to produce a solution. So our goal is not to give a specific solution from the design team, although which is not forbidden from the chair's mails. Okay, next slide. This is the members of our design team. I would like to thank all for this discussion and contribution to this design team. Okay, next slide.
Tony P., would you kindly mute your mic if you're going to type?
Sorry?
Continue.
Not your
Okay.
problem, G. Someone else was typing and making noise. John just told him to quiet.
Okay. Okay. So this is how it worked in the last 2 months. Basically, we had most of our discussion happened on the mail list, and the people can check the mail archives for the design team. And then in addition, we also held one conference call to speed up the discussion, and the minutes can be found on the Etherpad. Apparently, we faced some difficulty in collecting all the team members at a one-time slot. So the conference call was not used as a very frequently tool for the discussion. We prefer to use the mail list. Okay, next slide. Okay, the first thing we did in the design team is to identify the scope. And we have agreed to work on the data center case first in the design team. And more precisely, it is about when BGP is used as the underlay routing protocol in the data center. At the same time, we will also consider the difference between the data center case and the other cases like the WAN or IXP case. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the most important thing we did in the last 2 months is about the requirements. We want to identify a minimal set of common requirements based on the existing proposals and based on the design team discussion. And here are the common requirements we got. We can check briefly. First is we need to support different address families like IPv4 or IPv6 for the BGP session. And second, we need to support both using the direct interface address or the loopback address for the BGP session setup. And the third thing is we need to discover some necessary information for the peers session setup, like the IP address of the peers and the AS numbers. Then we want to have some authentication to be enabled for the BGP outcome messages. The last is this BGP outcome should be able to enable some liveness detection mechanism such as BFD. So we can see the common ones are relatively short. We agreed on this small set, and we will see the other requirements we discussed in the design team in the following slides. Okay, next page. Okay, this is one requirement we discussed. We are still under, which is still under discussion in the design team, which is the capability of communicating arbitrary attributes to peers according to the operator's needs. This is, I think, a general capability which should be only used between the BGP peers, and it will not be propagated further to other nodes in the network. Basically, the design team thinks this kind of capability useful, but there's still some discussion about 2 points in the design team. The first is whether it should be part of the BGP autoconf procedure or it should be done in BGP itself, which means it can be, this kind of information may be exchanged after the BGP session is established. The second thing is whether it should be a generic capability for operators customization, and so that we don't need to, if any encoding or any well-known IDs in IETF. This is supposedly for the for the operator to customize its meanings and its value. Another option is we may introduce some guidance or structures to this kind of attribute. So this can be part of the design for this kind of attribute. Okay, next page. Next slide. Can you hear me?
G, you have the list of other suggested features up. Is that what you see?
Oh, sorry. I think my network is not that good. Can you go back to the previous one?
The requirements collected is
Oh, okay, next page. Thank you.
list of other suggested features, number 1. That's
Yes,
what's
yes.
showing.
Yeah, it's marked slide number 8.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why this one is good. So in this page, at the next one, we list some features suggested in some existing proposals, but they are not adopted yet from the design team. I think they may be reviewed later, or some of them can be considered further whether they will be added into the minimal common set of requirements, or someone may be optional, but still useful requirements. Okay, we can go to next page. I mean, not to read this one by one.
You are on list of other suggested features too.
Yeah. Yeah, this is another set of the suggested features we collected from existing proposals. Okay, we can go to next page. Okay, this one is about some design principles of this BGP auto configuration mechanism, which we may need some further discussion in the working group. Like we got some feedbacks from the design team members about the design principles, which are listed in this page. The first is someone prefers to have this mechanism independent from the BGP session establishment, while some others think this mechanism should not change the BGP session establishment or routing exchange, but it may have some interactions for the figuring of the setup or removal of the peer session based on the BGP peer auto-discovery mechanism. Some people think we need the mechanism generic for any link layer protocol. And another thing is whether we should make use of existing widely implemented or deployed protocol so as we can reduce the cost and the complexity. Or we can define a relatively new protocol, but widely applicable to not only BGP, but also other routing protocols which need the layer 3 discovery. Another thing we need to consider is about the message size, because I think we had some discussion before in the working group about whether if we have some particular attributes added to a message, maybe the size can be bigger, and for some kind of protocols it can be an issue, or whether how can we deal with that with some extensions. Also, we require some coordination with other SDOs. Yeah, so this, I think for this design principles, we need some further discussion in the working group in the wider
Before we go
please.
on, before you go on, do you want to ask any questions or take any feedback on this, or do you want this to be an email list discussion?
Maybe you can finish the slide first, or
okay, we'll go to the rest of the slides and come back.
Yeah, if anybody wants to break in, they can add themselves to the queue, of course, but otherwise just please continue, I think.
Okay. So this page, we list the existing proposals we reviewed and discussed in the design team. And there are 4 drafts which are mainly about the discovery in the data center. Well, the last one is merged from 2 other drafts, and it is mainly about the BGP auto discovery in the 1 or XP scenarios. So it is currently it is not listed in the analysis on the next page. Okay, we can go to the next one. Okay, this is some brief analysis to the existing proposals, and I'd like to thank Warren for his review, and based on his review, I add some more information about the functions of each proposal. In this table, I list the design principle of each draft, the basic functions it provided, and some consideration about the extensibility for the additional attributes, and also the concerns we discussed on the design team list. Okay, I think from the design principle, this one is very important. We can see different drafts propose different mechanisms, either based on existing layer 2 protocols or based on new layer 2 protocols or some new messages for BGP, or we use some existing BGP messages. And this can impact the extensibility of this mechanism. And for the functionalities, I think some of the drafts you can see provide a long list of the capability functions and then attributes. Okay, for the concerns, I think for the LLDP draft, the major concern is about the length limitation and its progress of the V2 in IEEE. And for the L3DL URPC draft, there's some concern about why this rely dependency on the support of the layer 3 DL. And there's a session-based mechanism. Maybe this is some more details we need to discuss further in the working group. And for the draft 2, there's some concerns about its change to the BGP mechanism and the state machines introduced. The last one, the draft RASUK, I think this draft is introduced very small changes to the BGP, and consequently the solution is not quite complete, and the scale extensibility is relatively limited.
There's a question in the queue. Please go ahead.
Okay, I think we almost finished.
Okay, you want to do you want to take the question in the queue now, or hold to the until you finished your last slide?
Okay, we can take it now. It's also okay.
Okay, please go ahead then.
Okay.
Robin?
Jamie, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so
I can hear.
Okay, so I want to know that the second one, the third one, I mean, so that's the BGP message based on UDP, and the fourth one is reuse BGP open message with the new UDP port. I want to know what's the difference. I mean, so that's the for the third one still use some of the existing UDP port. Is that right?
Because it's changed to UDP, I think the port number need to be assigned by INA also. But the major difference is the third one, and it defines a new BGP message format, and is more extensible, can introduce many additional TLVs. Well, the last one is to reuse existing BGP open message format so that it can introduce smaller changes. The cost is cannot be that extensible. Maybe you can use existing BGP open optional parameters to introduce some new attributes, but it's not that flexible or extensible as the third one.
Okay, I see. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we can go to the next slide.
Yes, I have no other question.
Okay. Hi, Sue.
Sue, next slide, please.
Okay. For the next steps, here's the things we want to do for the next steps. The first is, as I mentioned, we want to confirm the minimal set of common requirements based on the list of the common requirements we show in the slides, and based on the further discussion about the other requirements. And the second thing is we want to raise some consensus on the design principles. And then based on this, we probably could put this requirements and the design principle into one requirement document. Then I think the job of the design team will be done, and we can hand this the next step solution discussion to the working group. We can invite more people to join this discussion here. Okay.
There's Jeff is in the
That's
mic
all.
queue.
This is Jeff. So I think one other thing that didn't quite make it out of our discussion in the design team that's somewhat relevant is where some of the attributes for these protocols come from. We sort of left it as it has to be figured out, and we have to decide if that's an important thing as part of the auto configuration itself. So as examples, interface address configuration. Some of the proposals that use things like IPv6 link locals obviously don't require coordination. Things that happen over some form of global address would. So that means that may need to interact with things like DHCP. The same thing is true for like AS number discovery. Is that something that is provisioned or not? And depending on exactly which solution space you're targeting for things like data center, those things can vary. Eventually, some of them end up being driven strongly by provisioning. That's my comment.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
Okay, and then we have Robin next.
Zhenmin Huawei, I have a doubt on the page 8. So can you go to the page 8? Okay, I think this 9, page 9. 8. Sorry. Here. Okay, Jamie. So here mentioned is the provide layer 2 keep alive message for session continuity. I'm a little confused about this one. Why is layer 2 instead of layer 3?
Okay. I see. This is actually this requirement is collected from the existing draft layer 3 DL, which is a more generic, and the layer 3 neighbor discovery is just one specific feature of it. So this is a more generic requirement from this base layer 3 L3DL draft, which is we collected all these requirements from the relevant drafts, and this one has not been fully discussed in the design team. So I just put it here, but maybe it's not directly relevant to the BGP out of discovery requirement.
Okay. I know this is not adopted yet, right?
Yeah, these are what we collected.
Okay. Yeah, because I think there are different layer 2. So I think if this requirement is taken into account, I think maybe a little less. That's my point.
Okay.
Hmm.
I think that Torles was next. However, I also see a couple of the design team members chiming in on the chat, and I'd like to offer them the opportunity to jump the line if they think it would be appropriate.
Randy jumping the line. Slides 8 and 9 are specific, not requirements. Don't panic, Robin. Don't panic, Jacob. They were specifically said, put on the side.
Hmm.
Right?
That's what that knot on the top is for, right?
Yeah, but that was on slide 8 and not on slide 9. Right? And slides 8 and 9 were specifically not requirements. We're still looking at them out of the corner of our eyes, but they are
And I see Warren also has his hand up, and he's also a design team member, so I'd like to give him a chance to jump in.
Warren Kamari, just clarifying that the layer 2 stuff, an easier way of explaining that was stuff like BMP. Wow, well, that made everybody stop talking. Just to clarify, the provide layer 2 keep live messages was, should this also be used to configure something like BMP, because it's a standard part of many people's configs. And as Randy said, these are not adopted, just things people are talking about.
Thanks, guys. So Torles had a comment.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't have the time to read these different proposals, but I was wondering if folks had suggested to use some of the building blocks we have done or in the process of doing in the IETF. So one is a CBOR CDDL as a way to encode message formats, and with CDDL have a formal specification language for it, which I think would up-level this next generation kind of auto configuration protocol from one-off TLVs. And the second one is GRASP, which basically builds on it and is a very simple way to define standard message exchanges and also extend multicast discovery with very simple flooding across the layer 3 domain in case it has to be deployed in something that's more than a simple layer 2 network.
Okay. Thanks for your suggestion. I think about the encoding, maybe I can consider it later. And currently, I think the most important thing is about the design principles. Once we reach some consensus on this part, the encoding can be something we discuss how to efficiently code a message and make it more generic. I think this is something we can add further in the following discussions in the working group. Any other questions or comments?
Randy, please go ahead.
I think it's just worth noting that the group is very much trying to do two things. One is be as simple as possible, and two is to do as little as possible, just to let BGP open happen, because BGP takes care of a lot of stuff once it can open. And
then we have Jeff in the queue.
This is partially seconding Randy. Thus far, the design team has kept to keeping things fairly simple. I think the open questions are mostly about where to be intrusive into the protocols. So to offer the example of draft shoe, which is, as I described in the chat, is being sort of like the LDP hello. LDP hello has impacts on the LDP state machine for the TCP session. BGP does not require that. So we don't have to necessarily get quite that intrusive. So that's one possibility in the interactions. Different examples are what transports things go over. So the feature for the LLDP one was mostly just leveraging existing stuff that is intended for a switch context, but that's not necessarily useful for contexts that are outside of fabric provisioning, which is our key topic right now. That said, mostly our analysis has been falling into what is useful for just getting BGP to come up. Here are the core things that are necessary to get the job done. Encapsulation of that set of information and the transport of it is, I think, going to be somewhat flexible depending on the scenario. I think the one thing that I keep pushing on that's still hasn't gotten a lot of traction in the design team yet, I need to spend time trying to convince people, is what's listed as a group ID inside the LLDP, but its general intent is as a piece of information about the role of the device that is attending to establish a BGP session with you. One of the things that I think is an open question, and this is, I think, a little bit easier to see in a switching environment rather than general service provider environments, is that elements in the network have a role depending on what they're plugged into and what they're supposed to do. So in a standard CLO fabric, leaves are intended to be in a specific place and only intended to talk to their aggregation layer, which are only which could talk to one of two layers, and the spine can talk to the aggregation layer. You're doing the standard three-tier process. In such cases, help in the auto configuration to prevent misconnectivity is potentially helpful, but it's not a requirement. So I think there's some interesting questions around things that are potentially helpful for either misconnectivity checks or in cases that are outside of fabrics, being able to say things like a device is trying to discover, is this thing a route reflector or not? There's a different piece of work that AC and I are on for the IGPs for BGP route reflector discovery that has very similar considerations. Anyway, that's my statement.
Randy is next in the queue.
Just to contrast, Jeff's point's well taken, but the opposite, or not opposite, but complementary view is that the types of roles and the number of roles are not enumerable. They're really heavily dependent upon what the operator is doing. And so a mechanism which allows arbitrary attributes to be shared before BGP open can cover that case. I'm a spine, I'm a leaf, I'm vanilla ice cream, right? It's operator configured. I think as protocol designers, it's too easy to fall into the classic vendor trap is I know better what the operator should be doing. I've learned over the years I don't.
So as a follow-on to that, I agree with Randy. That's one of the reasons why the ID was left very abstract in the document, so that policy could be used to take care of these sorts of things. It's treated basically as a set of tags on the session that used in the deployment for appropriate purposes.
I don't see anybody else adding themselves to the queue. Oh, I do. Please go ahead. Witkowski.
Hello, this is Adam Witkama. Adam Witkowski. I was just thinking, like when you suggested that there could be a BGP extension in form of UDP and all that stuff. From operators' point of view, I would rather go with the sort of separate protocol where I could sort of clearly define, like, okay, I'm not running this protocol in my edge. Therefore, I could better secure my edge as opposed to have all these extra features or protocol interactions within the protocol that I must run at the edge, like BGP. Having enabled, obviously we do secure the edge with the infrastructure ACLs and all that stuff to just specifically match the TCP interaction, but still, not all operators do that. So ideally, there would be a separate protocol for this, at least.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
I think that's pretty clear. Anybody else want to join the mic line? Okay, Jay, it's back to you.
Okay. So I think I finished my presentation, and maybe we need to have some further discussion in the working group about the design principles. We will also continue to work on to make it simple, to make a minimal set of requirements. We can converge on a few mandatory features for this protocol. And based on these two, we can put them into the document, and then the solution discussion can happen.
Thanks. So question from the chair is, do you guys in the design team have a sense for when you think you can have these next steps done? In particular, do you think that maybe we can have can reach the final bullet there, hand the solution?
You mean all of this next steps to be done in the design team, or?
Yeah. So
in my understanding, maybe some of it.
If you don't know, then it's okay. But is it a reasonable goal for us to say that by summertime we're ready to open this, and publish the requirements that you're going to produce, and or the proposed requirements, I really should say. I should be careful about that and put that back out to the working group.
Yeah, I hope we can do that maybe on next meeting, and we will need more input from the working group, especially on the design principle. also like some operators can give some input about whether they prefer it to be a relatively independent protocol or it's part of a incremental extension.
So-
even if it's not that deeply coupled.
Let me suggest that if you're soliciting input from the working group, I mean, it's great that you've made this presentation and published these slides, and it's probably good to follow up with a email to the working group with a pointer to the slides at least. And it would be fine to go ahead and create a working group draft, or create a draft rather, and put this information into the draft as well that people can reference. That's optional, but it's sort of the usual way that we send things to the working group for comment.
Right. I'll say so. That's a good way to proceed.
Any other comments from you, Sue?
Yes, have to stop typing first. I think that maybe you could talk to the working group, since we may be in this at-home situation. Maybe we could schedule a targeted IDR discussion on those design principles toward the end of all of these interims. Maybe we could ask for another one and just focus on what you want to know from the working group on the design principles, and have a very short rough draft as well as presentation for that. That way we can push this along so that maybe by summer, when we might get to have a IETF face-to-face meeting, we could have both the common requirements and some thoughts, straw man proposal on the design principles. Just a thought, and I'd be glad to talk about that offline as well, G.
So Randy says in the chat, which summer, which I take to be a haha, I'm only serious kind of comment, this summer.
I don't think we're going to have a face-to-face this summer. And
Oh.
I don't think, I think the working group, the design team is about to enter the pressure point where we have to make some crux decisions on what the information is now sort of roughly agreed, but the transport and the encoding are the key points, and like investigating whether LLDP really will do, whether we have to invent something wonderful and new, so on and so forth. And I think that's why you made a design team, and having that for the whole working group is probably not going to focus the discussion.
Yes.
Yes. Hope that we would specifically have a proposal from the design team. Do you think we'll, G and Randy, do you think we'll get to, do you need to have your design principles agreed to before you get to the discussion of transport and codings?
I mean, that's what I take it to. I mean, I'm just looking at G's list of bullets, so and I take that to be in, serialized order. So requirements, design principles, requirement document, and handoff, which makes sense to me. And the reason that I put the question a few minutes ago was just that G had asked specifically for working group input, so it seemed like a good time to ask about kind of what your timeline looks like and so on. I do see Jeff saying in the chat, I agree with Randy, and Warren saying yup, which I was confused enough by what Randy said to not be exactly sure what they're agreeing with, other than I think what Randy said is we're not done yet, and please don't jiggle our elbows too much until we've completed the task you set us, which makes sense to me. I do not want to jiggle your elbow. We will schedule I'm getting echo. We'll schedule a interim when you guys are ready for it.
I think we're making progress, John, just not at a screaming pace, but I didn't expect that. And given the year of the plague, you can beat us up in June or July if we don't have progress to report.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And I see that Jeff has put himself in the mic queue also. Please go ahead.
Thanks. Where I think I agree with Randy, the issue with trying to issue even like a preliminary draft of some form right now is we've done a couple of levels of decomposition, which you saw G present. What I think is need to be done is some of those secondary features probably need to be discussed, either be included or ruled out, or to decide if we're going to have some level of optional features of these things. But the bigger problem with trying to present it at this point is that we're going to end up, I think, with, again, here's the functional components that are part of the common proposals. There's going to be transports, and there's going to be a few other points. If we present them now, effectively what we'd be giving to the working group is this large cross product that could suggest any number of implementations.
Right, which is exactly what we hope to avoid by chartering the design team. So yeah, I agree too. That's not what I hoped to get out of the design team, is a giant laundry list. So just to be clear, my comments about, if you want input from the working group, please focus it by sending, a list of questions, sending your slides, and or sending a draft to the mailing list. That's if you want input from the working group. I'm not saying you must do this. Does that make sense? Not hearing anybody say, John, that doesn't make sense. Either you think I'm so far off in left field that you don't even want to say, or you agree. Okay. Further comments, further questions? Otherwise, I think we're done with this one. Thank you very much, G, for presenting. Thank you to the whole design team for working to push this forward in, as Randy points out, a difficult time.
Okay, thank you, John.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Hi everyone. Today I'm going to present request for candidate pass for SR policy. Next page. Right now, head end of SR policy node will receive candidate pass for SR policy through different ways. For example, through configuration, through BGP SR policy, or through PCE SR policy. So what is, we can summarize this as a controller initiate. However, sometimes we may want head end to initiate or some kind of SR policy. Because when some event happens, and would like to controller or some single point to generate SR policy. That policy satisfies some requirement from the head end, and then that central point will generate the candidate path, which satisfy the requirement from the head end, and then send this send those candidate paths which satisfy the requirement to the head end, and then head end can create a forward engine, create a path. So in fact, this kind of is already existing in the PCE. Want to extend BGP to have this kind of functions. So in fact, the extension is simple. We just use existing SR policy, and we define some new stuff as a request parameters. Next page. So right now we have a existing SR policy, and then we have previous version. So this is the second version. So here, in compared to the previous version, we made some updates. So basically, the updates is highlighted in the blue color. In these updates, we define a new request subtail V, and then we update two subtail Vs. So all these extensions will include those informations for the request from head end to the single point or controllers. So next page. So this is a new subtail V. We call the request parameter subtail V. So this subtail V will contain a request ID, because for each request, we would like to have a ID to identify this request. In addition to these request IDs, we also have some kind of parameters to indicate the request. For example, we may have a flag to indicate that this request is for re-optimization of existing paths. Hello? Any question?
Please, everybody who's not Waymo, please mute.
So we have we define three flags. One is for re-optimization. Another one is we have indication whether we want a bi-directional path. And the third option, the third flag is that whether we want a loose path or strict path. So that's about this a new request parameter subtail V. Next page. We also added details about synchronized subtail V. In fact, this is originally we have SFAC, synchronization factor. So we just change the name to synchronization subtail V. So in this synchronization subtail V, we add more information because we want to synchronize multiple requests. So we need to have those request IDs for those multiple requests. As soon as we have multiple request IDs, then the central controller can compute the path to consider all these requests at the same time. So this is the updates for the synchronization subtail Vs. Next page. This is, we just updated this subtail V. We changed the name and we also changed the format of this subtail V. This is subtail V just describes the attributes of SR path, such as exclude all, any, include any, include all. So this is similar to the LSP path attributes. So next page. Yeah, I think that's all the updates for this draft. So I would like to request the comments from the working group.
I see a long comment in the chat from Ketan, and he said, I don't need to get to a mic. Okay, I will read your comment then, because I think that we should try to keep it in one conversation. It says, this draft proposes an extension for BGP to support a request response mechanism for SR policy. We know that BGP does not natively support such transaction mechanism, unlike PSAP. Can the authors please describe how this mechanism is supposed to work and how such SR policies are going to be maintained?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's we propose this one, and then we want to have some comment from the working group. So right now, so here the extension is that we use the existing SR policy, but in this SR policy, when this SR policy working as a request, we use a special flag. For example, we propose to use distinguisher, use a FFF, and then when we set that one, that value send from head end to the controller, that means it's a request. And then after controller request, receive this request, and then controller may do some special processing. Oh, this is a request, and then I can reply to the head end. So this is the one proposal for the extension to BGP. I think maybe the other person can give suggestions.
So I'm putting myself in the mic line, speaking as a working group member. I just have sort of a fundamental question or concern, which is, I mean, let me say it in both ways. The question is, as you pointed out, PCEP has this. Why do we need to reinvent PCEP? And the concern is that, as you've just sort of talked through, it's not really a natural fit for BGP. BGP has things like state compression that really mess with the whole idea of request protocols. So it seems like, you know, number one, we already have one. Why do we need two? And number two, if we were going to invent a second one, I don't think I would choose BGP as the container to stick it inside. So I'll stop talking and hear your reaction.
Yeah, that's a good question. So PCEP have this request and reply protocols there. So why do we need to do the same thing in the BGP? So the thing is that right now, PC working as a controller, so they have that kind of request and reply protocol. So BGP is also used as a controller. So it looks like we have some kind of requirement to have this kind of a request and a reply. So that's for the first question. For the second question is that I know you're right. The BGP is already have some kind of things there, and then we shouldn't broken the BGP or change BGP's behavior too much. So that's for second question. So my opinion is that since we have BGP as a controller, and then we have this kind of requirement, so this should we have to just find some way to adapt it to BGP, and then that might BGP to have the same or similar functions, those kind of request and reply. So that's my opinion to your answer to your second questions.
Okay, thank you. And sort of putting back on my meeting moderator hat, I'm just going to read the comments that were put into the chat. So Jeff Tensura says +1, I think, to my mic comment. Jacob Hyde says, I also think BGP is not a request response protocol. Why not use PCEP? Jeff Haas says, more importantly, BGP regularly fails to be request response. And then he makes an editorial comment about BESS, which I won't repeat. Ketan says, it is not just request reply, but also need to maintain the SR policy through its entire lifetime. It would help the working group if the authors could describe the entire proposal in sufficient details, i.e. the entire life cycle of the SR policy. And that's all the comments.
Yeah, regarding the details, I think this we just post the second version, and then in the next version, and then we may details, and also address comments from the people.
Okay, right now with sort of working group chair hat on, I think you have some skepticism to overcome. So I think creating that, if you choose to proceed forward, I would encourage you to fill in that detail.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Any other comments for the mic? Otherwise, I think we can probably move on. Okay, next please. Thank you.
So this we're talking about the BGP for network availability. Next page. So right now we know central controller is used more and more in the network to control the network. And then BGP is one option to work as a controller. So since a controller is a single point of failure for the network, if a network is controlled by a central controller. So in order to provide the reliability or availability of a network, so people propose using controller cluster, which contain 2 controllers and then a number of more controllers. That's one option for to enhance the reliability of the controller. So another way is that we can use multiple controllers work at the same time. So that and there are more options for controller reliabilities. So first we focus on network controller clusters for this kind of architectures reliability. So for controller cluster, so when the failure happens in the cluster, they may split into different separate cluster groups. After split, so each group will elect themselves as a primary controller group and then control the network. So in this case, because the cluster split and then they don't know each other and then they're out of sync, and then they also control the network at the same time, and then we may have issues. So in order to resolve this issue, and then one proposal is that even though the cluster is split, but all the controllers, in order to control the network, they still have connections to the network. And then we can use some of these connections to exchange information about the separated controllers. And then in this way, and then the separate controller will know each other, even though we have multiple failures in the cluster. And then they can make correct decisions to select one primary controller group, and then that primary controller group to control the network, and then we can have a more reliable network. That's the rough idea. So next page. So the idea is that so we can let every controller in the controller cluster have an information channel to one network element. One network element. For example, we can every controller have a HTTP session to P3. So since the primary controller already have sessions to every F8 node, we can use that controller channel as an information channel. For the secondary or third controller, we can have an extra session or special session to have the same network element, and then use that special session as an information channel to have exchange the information among the controllers when the cluster have multiple failures. So after cluster have failure and then cluster split in multiple separate groups, so only each group will select do the selections. I mean, they will select primary, secondary, and the third secondary. Each group will do the selection, and then only the intended primary group in that group will send the information about that group to that same network element. And then that network element will transmit those information to the other controllers. So in this way, even though we have multiple layers in the cluster, and then the cluster is split in multiple separate groups, because we have this information channel to exchange information about controllers, then every controller will have the whole picture of each controllers, and then they can select the primary controller or primary group correctly, and then that primary group will control the network correctly. So that's the rough idea about the these things. So next page. So here we talk about sending information from the intended primary controller to the other controllers through a network element. So here, in the normal situation, only primary controller will send the information. So the information will include the primary controller's current position. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 means primary, 2 means secondary, 3 means tertiary, and so on. And the current position of this controller and the older position of this controller, and then this controller's priority to become a primary controller, and the number of controllers in this group, in this cluster, and then the controllers' IDs in this group, such if we have a controller A, B, and C, and then controller A's ID, B's ID, and C's ID, and so on. So this is the information the controller or primary controller will send it to the other controllers through a network element. So after failure in the clusters, so we may have a number of separate controller groups. So each group will select its intended primary controller and the intended second controller, and so on. So only the intended primary controller in each group will send those informations to the other controllers through a network element. And then after every controller have those information, they will determine correct primary group. So after the controller determined the primary controller group, and then that primary controller group will control the network. So that's the rough idea. So in the case, because in the case that the two groups are tied or compete to the primary group, so we have also proposed some kind of tie-breaking rules. For example, if we have tie, so the rule, for example, we have a rule that the maximum number of controllers, the group has a maximum number of controllers will be win for the election. So in the case that if two groups have same number of controllers, they are tied. In this case, we may use the parameter, the older position number. So if one group has a bigger or higher older position number, and then they will win. So that will break the ties. So in any case, only one primary group will be elected. So after we have all the information. So next page. Next page. So this is the information we're going to distribute, for the extension. So first, we need to extend BGP to have capabilities. This is capabilities for support controller HA. We have this kind of capability triple. And then we have a flag, a C flag. So C flag means that if a controller send this capability, that will send C flag to 1. If network element send this kind of capability, it will send this C flag to 0, means I'm a network element. Next page. So this is a new NLRI on the new IT study, and then this NLRI will contain those information I will talk about, will contain position, old position, priority, and the number of controller in the group, and those controller IDs in this group, or in this cluster. Next page. This is talking about recovery procedures. So when a cluster have failures and then cluster split into multiple groups, and then each group will select its intended primary, intended secondary, and then only the intended primary controller will send the information to a network element. So in the normal case, because we have a cluster, only the primary controller in that cluster will send those information. So after the failure, and then each group, only the intended primary controller in that group will send the information about its group. So after each group sends those information, and then every group will have information about the other group. And then only one primary group will be elected correctly. And then that one primary group will control the network. So that's the idea of the recovery procedure. The next page. I think that's all about this draft, and I would like to request comments from the working group.
Okay, we have two people in the mic line, Linda and then Jeff Tansura.
Hi, this is Linda. Thank you very much for the presentation. So I'm just curious, like today's many applications used, they have many instances, and to the client or to the peer, they appear as one. So if you use a virtual IP address to represent the cluster of BGP controllers, then they can decide among themselves who will be in main control of synchronizing all the information. But to the PE, the BGP, they will be the same. There's no difference from PE perspective. I'm just curious, why don't you use that way?
Well, this I think the cluster outside point of view is one controller.
Yes.
But inside is multiple controllers.
Right. So just detach it from BGP per se. You have a cluster of controllers. You may have synchronization among each other, but to the PE perspective, when they propagate the routes, when they receive the routes, it's all the same. It's coming from one entity. Maybe it's a virtual entity. They don't really care which one send it to them.
Yes, you're right. From outside point of view, it's one entity. But from inside the point of view, there are multiple entities. But within inside, we may have multiple failures. And then because without failure, those entities inside, they will synchronize. But if we have failure that split those one entity into multiple entities, it will be out of sync. And then because after a split, then because they're out of sync, they don't know each other, and then they will elect themselves as a primary controller, and then multiple entity will elect themselves as primary controllers, and then those multiple primary controllers will try to control the network, and then we may have issues. So we need to have some way after we split, and then we still get the information and still know each other, and then we can select one real primary controller or controller group correctly. That's the intention here.
Yes, you can do the same way with virtual IP to represent the cluster of them. Say, basically from PE's perspective, they just receive from this one virtual IP address to the controller. And if the cluster fail, one cluster fail, other cluster fail, you can have a load balance to elect one. So my point is you have many more PEs than the controllers. So just keep the PE behavior the same, and then have the controllers decide among themselves to choose one.
Yeah, I think maybe my understanding that you are talking about multiple controllers working at the same time, right? Is that the case? So I think
just for a class of controllers, you coordinate with each other on which one to control. Just take P out of the picture. Let themselves elect the right one, but you just have a one virtual IP address to represent all of them.
But if you have one IP address, but because inside the split, how can the communicate? That's the issue, right?
So maybe we can leave it there for this part of the conversation. I think Jeff Tansura, did you want to add anything?
Very similar comment. I mean, there's a number of very advanced schemes to provide database synchronization. We've been doing it for 30 years. BGP is definitely not one of them. And I mean, I don't really see a reason to do it this way.
And AC Lyndon was also in the queue.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed we have some, well, it makes, that's the big question is these clusters are going to have to be talking to each other anyway. Why would you just do this this high availability election outside of it and put in BGP? Make any sense? And it makes even less sense. It makes even less sense to put it in the ICPs. And I know you guys got a blanket across all of them because then it goes to the whole routing domain. I don't know why you put this in BGP of this election and it almost seems like it should go someplace else. It should go in this whatever you're doing between those controllers. We're not to the point where you can just take controller A off the shelf and controller B off the shelf and run them, and having this little piece standardized isn't, without the synchronization itself between the control clusters doesn't make any sense at all from a requirement standpoint to me.
I'm adding myself.
This provide another way. I know there's lots of synchronizations for those kind of states. This is provide another way, and then maybe this way, whether it's better or not, I think maybe need to get more into more details.
So this is John Scudder. I'm adding myself to the queue as a meeting participant. Well, actually, first, as a moderator, I will pass on Tony Prajenja saying, in fact, inventing Paxos over BGP is a curious idea. So I agree with AC. And then for myself, I will add, yeah, this is basically a group consensus protocol that you're trying to invent, and there are various places where you can get it off the shelf. You might want to take a look at Zookeeper. I also don't really see a need to stick it into BGP. End of comment. And back to moderator hat. Are there any further comments? If not, I think we can move forward. Oh, Jacob Heitz also wants to put himself in the line. So Jacob, please go ahead.
I was just about to echo Jeff Tantura's comment about if because you didn't say it on the actual mic, but I agree with him, and that if there is any connectivity, if any PE or NE can speak to more than one controller, then those two controllers can route through it to each other, and therefore you do not have a partition. So the only way you can have a partition is if all of the PEs are also partitioned.
And I'll relay a comment from Robert. He says, yep, I said that same comment about Zookeeper a few weeks back on the IDR list. So, Wimo, I don't know if you have any responses or comments, or if anybody else wants to add themselves to the queue.
Yes, I mentioned that because we may have some kind of synchronization mechanism already there. I think maybe this one, I think maybe is most simpler. For example, so for those kind of synchronization is inside, and then some those synchronization paths may be broken, as I mentioned, because of multiple failure inside the controller. So, however, controller always have connections to the network element. So this is the connection is more persistent. So the other connections among the controller is broken, but we still have connections through network element, and then we can use this path to do the synchronization among those separated controllers, right? So this is another option there, and then this is provide extra availability is there, and then we may use it. And also this one is very simple. We just only the intended primary controllers send the information through network element and then to the other controllers. So also the information is a minimum.
Okay, sounds like we have come to the end. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So next, please.
John, this is Sue. Did I miss one? I must have missed one. Hold on.
Okay.
I have next Giuseppe Piccola.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, there you are.
As these are not my slides. So.
Yes, that's what I said. I have one. One moment while I get that. John, I'm going to have to download them. Do you have them on your slide projector already?
Yeah, I think I can project if we can figure out how to pass the ball to me. Just pass me the ball and I'll project.
Okay. Are you host number 2? Yeah. Yep. You've got it.
Okay, one moment.
I'll download just for background.
Sure. Let's see. There we go.
Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Giuseppe, one of the co-author of this new 0.0 version draft that is a BGP SR policy extensions to enable in situ flow information telemetry. So next. The background and motivation for this this new draft is very simple. So we all know that the SR policy is identified through head-end, color, and endpoint information. And an head-end may be informed of the candidate path for an SR policy in different ways. And with this draft, is going to investigate the segment routing T policy ways to do that through BGP. And in particular, the document aims to define the extension to BGP to distribute SR policies in order to to enable the in situ flow information telemetry. In this way, several on-path telemetry methods, like just to mention the most famous one, like inbound OM and alternate marking, can be enabled automatically when the SR policy is applied. So next, just a quick review of the in situ flow information telemetry framework for whom, I don't know, many people is already familiar with this framework, but basically it's very simple. Is the framework architecture that want to univocally define how the on-path telemetry techniques can be applied in several situations. In particular, we can mention inbound OM, alternate marking, but there are also others like hybrid two-steps or other techniques that are investigated in the IPPM working group, for example. And the IFIT frameworks also allowed the so-called reflection loop telemetry application. This means that on the controller side, we can get telemetry information from the network, and based on this telemetry information that we can get, we can configure new actions, new configuration to the network in order to use this loop, configure in a better way our performance measurement. So next slide. So as I said before, the idea is to enable the on-path data plane telemetry for SR policies. And this framework allows the flexibility and in particular address the deployment challenge for most of these data plane methods. So in particular, all these methods to be applied have different challenges regarding the performance, the deployability, the flexibility. So this framework aims to facilitate the deployment of these methods in order to allow the flow selection, the dynamic network probing, the on-demand technique integration, and so on. Next. Coming back to the real scope of our draft, after this introduction of in situ flow information telemetry, the idea is very straightforward and simple. So considering the SR policy encoding structure, we are going to define new sub-TLVs that we can call them IFIT attributes in order to install and apply to the candidate our IFIT performance measurement technique. So for example, if we go to the next slides, we can see some details about that. For example, the SR policy for inbound OM, we can check the sub-TLV for different inbound OM options, like the trace option, the directly export option sub-TLV, the edge-to-edge option sub-TLV, and we can see that in sub-TLV there are all the information that are needed to configure and to activate the inbound OM option. And while in the next slide, we can see the SR policy for alternate marking. And this is based on the RFC 8321 and multi-point alt mark draft. And also in this case, there are all the information that are needed to configure and to activate the performance measurement. So next. Okay. This is, as I said, is just an introduction of this new draft. We would like to collect feedbacks, to have questions and comments that are welcome. Thanks.
Thanks. I don't see anybody in the mic queue yet, but we'll give it just a few seconds. If anybody would like to comment or ask questions, please do.
Hi, my name is Rakesh. Question, is this only for the end-to-end case, or you plan to do something for hop-by-hop case as well?
Yeah, for both cases, also hop by hop. for DSR policies, or also for hop by hop for SR path. So for all the hop of the SR path. There is also, we are working also in a companion document for so for PCE, so to do the same work. In order to also we are investigating how to generalize this for all the PC protocol, and yeah, that is
saying we will have. So you're saying we will have solution for both this BGP based as well as PCEP based.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that is the idea.
This is Adam Witkowski. So I would like to ask, is this to, so you're basically looking at gathering telemetry on a hub by hub basis in order to influence the path Sertana is taking? If that's the case, what kind of telemetry are you looking at? Is it sort of performance or any type of?
Yeah, not all the types of monitoring, but for example, alternate marking is one of the methodology that is by definition is hop by hop, allowed hop by hop measurement, and the same also for inbound OM for trace option is also hop by hop. It depends by which kind of on-path telemetry we are going to activate. And it's also managed by the controller side. So it is up to the controller based on which kind of service and which kind of traffic we are going and we would like to monitor. We can, the idea is to activate the most suitable performance method that is available. For example, like alternate marking or inbound OM or hybrid two-step or IFA. So there are several methodologies that there are several proposals in IPPM that goes in this direction. And the idea is to add the flexibility to activate the most suitable methods that is needed.
If you don't have any follow-ups, then Jeff is next.
So I guess my question here is, what level of dynamic behavior are you looking to trigger with this? Is this something you're looking to leave on paths all the time, or to sort of trigger on demand?
The flexibility is both on the there are kind, I think, of flexibility. For example, you can allow the on-path telemetry that can make the hop-by-hop measurement. But for example, if in case you don't need so detailed information because the SLA are not so important for that kind of traffic, you can just configure an end-to-end. So this is the kind of flexibility that I mean. So you can start to monitor your network without going deep in in all the monitoring details, and then if a problem comes, you can specify better the flow selection criteria, the flow selection, the most suitable performance measurement methods that allow you to get the important information. For example, you can prefer synthetic traffic to measure, so the so-called active measurement or passive measurement or also hybrid. So these three categories have different characteristics in terms of information that you can get, in terms of quality, and in terms of detailed information. So we all know that the active probing is not so detailed like the passive or hybrid probing. So this is what we mean for flexibility and dynamic approach.
The motivation for my question is that BGP does best when paths are stable. And if this stuff is being added and removed very regularly, it will cause the equivalent of route churn.
Yes. But yeah, that's why we are investigating both the BGP and the PC, because maybe there are several scenarios where it's better to use BGP, and other scenarios where it's better to use PC. Yes, so flexibility it depends. So it can be real time, but also we can say near real time, but also we can say a flexibility that can be for a period of weeks or months. It depends by which scenarios we are investigating, but I agree with you.
So your motivation is to do a path analysis rather than an individual forwarding element. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
My gut assumption is that PCE may be a better fit, but I believe the PCE people that are on this call will have a better opinion. I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. That was a bit of a leading question in case anybody wants to make comments about PCE. Otherwise, I think we are done with this one. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Sue, shall I just continue projecting? It's easy enough.
Uh,
We'll do that. Okay, here we go. Let's see, who's our speaker on this one? To see Yali Wang. Yali Wang, are you on the call?
I see him in the list, John. I'm just not hearing him. Kelly, are you on the call?
So Yali is the next two talks. Why don't we go on to...
He says he's speaking. Can we hear him?
We
Let's
cannot.
give it a moment.
Let me make sure that he is really, sorry to flick back and forth like that, unmuted.
He is on his headset, but it does not look it is working. Yali G normally dials in. If you can find a phone to dial in, we will pick you up then. If we need to give him a moment.
Yeah, I will check with Yali how to help her to dial in.
Okay, I think while you're doing that, we will proceed. Linda, are you ready to present?
This is Linda. I request to present at next session because my slides, I don't think I need to add a few more things to my slides.
I see. Okay. All right. Let's take 5 minutes, everybody, for a quick break and give Yali just a few minutes to try to get audio working. Hopefully that will be possible. And then we'll reconvene in a few minutes. So time now plus 5 minutes, which my local time would be 11:24.
John, since
Yes.
you have a few minutes, may I ask a question to the group? Really, just to repeat the question I sent to the mailing list.
Go for it.
Okay, so this is really for my draft. I didn't quite put in the document, revise the document clearly yet. I just want to get the feedback from the IDR working group. So this is for the SD-WAN segmentation. So in the deployment, we need different instances to represent, need a way to represent different SD-WAN segmentations or SD-WAN instances. It's very, very similar to VPN instance. So based on Robert's suggestion, using the route target to do it, I think that's a great way to use extended property route target. But we would like to use a different name instead of calling route target, which is same as VPN, just so that for the CPE who already support the VPN to have a different name. Would that be a problem? We call a different name. Same purpose as route target, we call it SD-WAN target. Would that be a problem? Anybody has any feedback on that?
Yep, the floor is open for comments.
No.
As I'm concerned, as you know, as a working group member, you can call it whatever you like as long as you make it extremely clear what it is, what namespace it's taken from, and all, you know, the other things that you want in a spec.
Okay, thank you. And also, second question is similar as VPN, right? In the VPN, different instances, different VPN can have their own private addresses, and they can use the route distinguisher to distinguish different routes belong to different instance. So we would like to use similar approach as well. But I'm just concerned of using the SAFI 128 because 128 has specific semantics associated with it. Would that be a problem? Any objections?
Sorry, what exactly is the thing you're asking? Would it be a problem to use SAFI 128, to not use SAFI 128? I'm not clear.
Okay, so we would like to use similar approach as SAFI 128, but use a different SAFI. Because just to distinguish the routes, it's not VPN routes, it's not injected to the particular VRF, it's really for the SD-WAN. So in the INR, we already applied the SAFI for SD-WAN. So can we use that SAFI instead? Any objections?
I see a comment from Robert in the chat. He says maybe take new AFI.
New AFI. But AFI only two, right? One is IPv4, IPv6. And then SAFI has so many, and we already applied one. INA already assigned one for SD-WAN. Would that be easier instead of going through another new AFI? The thing is for the propagation of the SD-WAN property is really between the edge node to its controller. And then controller can use this constraint route target to distribute to the relevant peers, right? So we'll not go through other routers. So we don't have the issues of backward compatibility, like some routers in the middle doesn't recognize that and drop it. We don't have that issue.
Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, so Linda, so I don't think there is really a problem with different SAFI from the draft perspective, of RFC perspective. The issue is with leveraging the implementation, right? Because if you're using different SAFI, now you either have a single implementation to handle VPN routes, or now you diverge the code to do different code bases, which is very difficult to maintain. So that's really difficult question to really answer in IETF. It's a vendors who will suffer if you just make a different SAFI just for the heck of it, right? You have to really have a case for diversity here.
Oh, okay. That's a good point. That's a good point. So the implementation perspective actually is you need different implementation. For one, that for SD1 case, you have you're injecting into different route table. For two, for the SD1 case, which is different from the traditional VPN, you have different egress port on the router. And depending on different egress port, you may have different properties. Some egress port you need encryption, some egress port you don't need encryption. So that has to be added. So from implementation perspective, it's actually much simpler to use SD1 SAFI.
Okay, I mean, I understand what your point is, and also to actually play from the perspective of isolation. Maybe it's a feature to isolate layer 3 VPN from SD1 VPN, even if you're using the same PE. So they may be pros and cons. I'm just saying, let's make them discuss on the list, pros and cons, and reach some consensus, right?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Makes
Thank
sense.
you, John, for giving me this few minutes to post the question.
Sure, and no trouble. And I see a comment from Sue also. Sue, did you want to say something?
Robert has everything I've wanted to say. I don't need to add anything.
Okay. And then Don Eastlake comments there are actually more AFIs available than SAFIs, which is true. It's a 2-byte space.
So then my question is, since I haven't been in IDR group for a very long time, why all the extensions go to SAFI instead of go to AFI? Is there any history associated with it?
Yeah, I mean as Jeff says in the chat, AFI is the address type. It's it's called an address family, so I think people have instinctively been like, well, this is only to be used for address families, and then SAFI has been used for subtypes underneath those things. In my personal opinion, it's kind of unfortunate that we even split it up into 2 different spaces, because really it ends up being like there's just a 3-byte number that means here's a particular behavior. Oh yeah, Robert says almost the same thing in the chat. Yeah, I agree. So it's kind of a historical artifact.
Okay, so you could have saying, hey, this is public IP address or this is private IP address, maybe duplicate from another VPN, then I call it different address type.
Yeah, I mean, you want to have some kind of logic to your selection so that people can understand what the heck you're doing. But beyond that, I don't really see an impediment to doing it out of they're both just code points that let you select a behavior.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So I'm afraid that we're not having much luck. Let's give Yeli 2 more minutes. That'll put us at the half hour. And if we've got audio by then, great. We still have enough time to proceed forward. And if not, we will drop off and try to continue at our next session. I guess while we're waiting for Yali to get audio, I'll just jump the gun and say things that I would say as final comments otherwise, which is thank you all for being here. I think this has been really actually exceeded, I don't know about anybody else's expectations, but exceeded my expectations in terms of seeing if we can use a virtual meeting as a substitute for an in-person meeting. And if you've got any feedback for what went well, what went poorly, how we can use these kinds of sessions in the future, or anything else, please send them either to the list if you want, or to either or both of the chairs. Yeah, thanks a ton. Oh, hey, Yali, seems like you have audio?
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Oh, sorry.
I think maybe you have audio going on 2 different devices right now, and I would say turn off the audio on whatever device you're not speaking into.
I'm trying to solve this problem. Hello.
Hello. Okay, yeah, no echo now, I think.
Yeah.
No, I'm wrong.
Oh no.
So you'll typically get that kind of echo if you have the mic and you have another device that you're getting audio out of, even if the mic's not active on it. Oh, and Randy points out that yet another person has their mic open while they're typing. This is true also. Okay, I'm gonna.
Song, I think you need to stop typing.
Okay, Yali, why don't you go ahead, please?
Okay. Sorry for this problem.
You're all learning, and we still have time to have your presentations. So please start when you're ready. Yali, you still there? Uh-oh.
And she's still on user 8, which I think was her dial-in number. Let's give it a moment.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you. Please go ahead. I'm projecting your slides.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this document will introduce a way to advertise in schedule flow information telemetry node capability through ITP and BGPLS for protocol extension. Next up. So across the IFAIT framework draft, IFAIT provide an high-level reference framework and reflection loop working solution for a family of telemetry techniques. So at present, as we all know, there are family of emerging past telemetry techniques, including IOM, post-par-based telemetry, IM direct export, and enhanced alternative marking. So, so that depends on the definition of the IFID domain in the IFID framework draft. The IFID domain is a part of the network which explores IFID, which may cross multiple network domains. So within an IFID domain, these are unpassed telemetry techniques may be selectively or partially implemented in different devices. So that in order to dynamically enable IFID functionality in a network domain, it is necessary to advertise and collect the IFID node capability information. That is the IFID option types supported in devices. So in this document, we extend IGP and BGPS protocol for IFID node capability advertisement. Next. So you may ask a question that why it is necessary to advertise IFID node capability. So here we list two applications to answer this question. So the first one is to avoid the leak of IFID specific header and mental data. So as we know, so within an IFID domain, one or more IFID option types may be added into package at the IFID losing nodes, and finally the header and mental data will be moved at the decapsulating node. So it's necessary to advertise the capability of the end node, I mean the decapsulation node, to the centralized controller to make sure the IFID option types supported in the devices. And the second one application is in order to adapt to the different network condition and different application requirements. And centralized controller needs to switch different telemetry techniques dynamically and automatically. So so here we also extend these protocols to signaling the IFID node capability to the centralized controller to determine whether IFID application can be supported in a given network domain. So this is the two applications here we list. Next, please. So before we extend the IGP and BGPL protocols, we firstly define the IFID node capability information here, because we considering 5 categories of IFID option types. In the first paragraph, and we also considering some subset or all the IFID option types, and their own corresponding IFID data field can be associated to an IFID namespace. So here we define the IFID node capability information consists of one or more pairs of namespace ID and option types enabled as you in this figure. The namespace ID is a 16-bit identifier defined in the previous draft, and the option type enable flag is a 16-bit field. It's a bitmap to indicate which type the IFIT option can be supported in the device. Next, please. So here, giving the OSPF protocol and ECS protocol and the BGPLs, we extended protocol to support the signaling node capability, and we defined the format of this IFIT node capability extension, TLV and sub-TLV. Next, please. Okay, this is all the content I present here, and comments are welcome, and we find this document further. Thank you.
A question at the mic from Rakesh. Please go ahead.
Hi, so this is Rakesh. One question I have is that I understand the requirement for the NCAP and DCAP node to know the capability because NCAP can add and DCAP doesn't understand, then we have a problem. But it's not clear to me at the intermediate nodes because the way I understand IOM data fields are if intermediate nodes do not support or understand, they can just ignore and they don't need to process it. So what is the use case for all the intermediate nodes?
Yali, did you understand Rakesh's question?
Yeah, actually, we also considering the intermediate node, whether it supports the IFIT capability. So we defined the, I mean, we extend the IGP protocol to signaling the intermediate, I mean the transmit node, whether it supports the IFIT option type.
Hello, Rakesh. Hello, can you hear? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
This is Robin. In fact, for the intermediate node, because you know that's the IOM, because you know that's it will use if you use the IPv6, the IOM option will be encapsulated in the hop by hop extension header. You know the existing some of the implementation of the routers. It will say the if it say the hop by hop header, it will send this packet to the CPU. I mean, so that's not processed by the hardware. It will send it to the line card to processed by the CPU. So this will cause the failure. We'll call this the performance reduction of the forwarding. So in order to avoid this error cases, so it's also need the node capability export for the intermediate nodes. If it cannot support this one, so that's the path. If it goes through this node, so the IFIT capability, IFIT detection will not be enabled. Yeah, so that's the case.
So there are two things. One thing is about the capability, and other thing is about enabling this function and disabling this function. So
No, I mean so that's the capability is exported by the nodes, by the ingress node and the intermediate nodes. But when you enable this the IFIT detection, this will be for a specific SR path or specific for a specific route. This being done by the BGP flow spec or the BGP SR policy. That has been explained by JCIP. That's the previous presentation.
okay, thanks, Robin.
Any other comments or questions on this one? Otherwise, we'll move on to the final one. Okay, Yali, please go ahead with the final presentation. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the last draft I think is about the BGP flow track extension in enable IC. Next please. So as I presented in previous drafts, there's a family of unprecedented techniques emerged, and in current deployment, there have been relatively stacked methods such as command line and netcom with some model to consider the specific flow or path to be monitored using the IFIT application. So, however, with the evolution of intent-based and autonomous network operation, the future data plan telemetry will support an on-demand and reflection loop fashion. So we think, considering the flexibility and the extensibility of telemetry data acquisition, it means that we need the automation to enable different IFIT option types, and we consider it useful for application-aware network operations to enable desired IFIT option type to the target flows. So we quote the dissemination of flow specification roles and the extension to BGP flow step to the IETF data package. We in this document we define the BGP extended community to enable the IFIT functionalities. Next, please. So here in this document, BGP specs, we think the BGP specs mechanism suppose automatic distribution of traffic policies. And so based on the BGP flow spec mechanism, we just extend the BGP extended community for the IFIT action in this document. So based on the extended community, the routing system can be instructed to add the IFIT option types into package or flows that match the flow specifications and update relevant IFIT data fields in package that travels. So that's on this motivation in this document. We we find type and the subtypes for the IFIX action specific extended community in according with the 5 different IFIX option type. Here we list. Next, please. So this is the first option types. It's about IOM pre-allocated and incremental trace option subtype. So based on the format of the BGP extended community, we define the value field concept of the namespace space ID, flags, IOM trace types. This data field has the same definition in the previous draft. I mean the IOM data draft. Next, please. And the second one is extension for the IOM DX option subtype. Similarly, extend the value field consists of the namespace ID, IOM trace type, and flag. Next, please. And third one is the IOM edge-to-edge option subtype. This one also considering the same data field, named with space ID, IOM end-to-end type. Next, please. And the final one is the enhanced alternative marking option subtype. Also, we send the data field below monitoring ID pure data field. Next, please. Okay, that is all the content in this draft comment. Welcome. Thank you.
Great, thanks, and thanks everyone for your patience while we fought with audio issues. Any questions or comments on this one?
I'm not in the queue, but I have a quick one. This is AC.
Go.
I can sort of see the community, you know, if you buy off on everything else with FlowSpec and using the community to turn this on and off, these OEM options. But I don't see why you want the packet, why you'd want this in the FlowSpec specification. You're trying to prevent in situ attack using in situ OEM.
The
document anyway, the real motivation.
I'm sorry.
Would you like to respond to that, Yeli, or shall we just note it for you to respond on the list?
Okay, I will respond in the email list.
Okay, great. And there's another question from Jeff Haas.
Hi, I might be addressing AC's comment. I think there are 2 use cases here. The first use case is that a FlowSpec injected route, you may want to get the in situ OEM information. Think about it sort of like triggered, NetFlow or IPFix as an example. So this is a way to potentially allow for like a FlowSpec DDoS mitigation to provide telemetry that can be used to help with the DDoS itself. So that's one use case. The second use case.
That's the community. Let's make sure we agree, and the community provides that, right?
But I was going into the second use case, which I have not read the draft, so I don't know if this is covered as well. But if you're looking strictly to get this type of OAM information for specific flows, we basically have, at least as far as I'm familiar with, two technologies in IETF that are sort of flow spec related. One being flow spec itself. The other one is the PSEP extensions that they put in that allow things to be flows to be addressed in PSEP as well. In those cases, being able to inject state into a router that says, for a flow that matches these properties, I would like to be able to get OAM information. That's a potentially useful property as well. I think it may have interesting scaling problems, and somewhat like what I addressed to the people working on the PSEP flow spec feature. If there are situations where rather going for a fully general PSEP extension, where you can address everything, and you're just looking to address certain types of flow tuples that are common for forwarding hardware. Easy example being like, I want to match a TCP flow that happens to be using this source port desk port to this source desk address. These are things that flow caches on forwarding chips already do for things like NetFlow. This means that you could also trigger the same thing they do for this type of OAM. But I think that would probably need to be in a different address family and potentially with different considerations.
Thank you for your comment.
I'm done with mine.
I think I heard somebody else starting to speak.
This is Robin. So I think that's the clarification is almost the point to for the ACES the question. I think that's this presentation. This session, the presentation for the IFIT, there are different granularity for the detection. I think this presentation is for the flow spec based route. I mean, so that's this is just the 5 tubes level. And also the previous presentation is the GCIP's presentation is based on the SR pass level. I mean, so that's you can see the aggregation levels the IOM detection.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. We have reached the end of our scheduled time, and I'll remind everybody that we have a second session scheduled next week, Wednesday. That's April 8th. Hope to see you all there, virtually speaking, and thanks so much, everybody, for hanging in there and making it a productive meeting. Okay, bye, everybody. Just have to figure out what to click on to end this meeting now. There we go.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Did you get